Stefanski can't seem to stay out of his own way. It's like everywhere he goes, the BS follows, and maybe it's because he's normally full of it. Kevin Stefanski gets absolutely destroyed by an NFL executive over this Atlanta Falcons situation. This thing is getting ugly really quick.
Oh, Baker Mayfield saw that Kevin Stefanski got hired in Atlanta and immediately went on X and said, "Hold on, I need everybody to know something before this man gets comfortable in." The NFC South. Still waiting on a text or call from him after I got shipped off like a piece of garbage. Can't wait to see you twice a year, coach. That is not a sports tweet. That is a man with a wound that never healed, going online and ripping the scab completely off in front of the entire NFL world. And the fact that he posted it the moment Stefanski got the Atlanta job, that's not impulsive. That's been sitting in his drafts. I'm Dre Fiver, this is Dre Reports, and today we are pulling the curtain all the way back on Kevin Stefanski's new gig with the Atlanta Falcons, because it is already messier than his final 2 years in Cleveland. Anonymous NFL executives are firing shots. The roster has a first-round pick who can't practice because of a serious legal situation. The quarterback room looks like something a coaching staff assembled in 45 minutes. And Baker Mayfield is out here posting from the audience section like he bought a front row ticket. Buckle up, because this story has layers, and Dre Fiver is going through every single one of them. Let's start with the basics, because some people watching this need the full picture before we get into the chaos. Kevin Stefanski was fired by the Cleveland Browns after the 2025 season following a run that finished 5-12. A two-time Coach of the Year who arrived in Cleveland in 2020 and took the franchise to their first playoff win since 1994. The man did real things in that city early. But the Deshaun Watson situation swallowed the entire organization whole, and Stefanski's final 2 seasons produced an 8-26 combined record that is genuinely hard to look at. He was gone by January 5th of 2026, and within 2 weeks, the Atlanta Falcons came calling. Matt Ryan, the former NFL MVP who is now running the Falcons football operations as team president, brought Stefanski aboard as head coach on January 17th. And from the jump, the reaction was complicated. Jemele Hill said publicly that Falcons fans she knew were, in her words, side-eyeing the hire because of how Stefanski handled the Shedeur Sanders situation in Cleveland, and because Atlanta has one of the most passionate black fan bases in the NFL. Former Browns wide receiver Jarvis Landry, who caught passes from this man for years, went on record questioning whether Stefanski could actually be a great NFL coach. And Baker Mayfield, who Stefanski watched blossom into an 11-5 playoff-winning quarterback in 2020 before the front office decided to blow that relationship up. And Chase Watson, Baker Mayfield logged on and chose violence. That is not a warm welcome for a new head coach. That is a man walking into a building where the smoke alarm is already going off. Now let's talk about what Kevin Stefanski is actually walking into in Atlanta, because the situation on the ground there is genuinely complicated and the league is already noticing. The Falcons have not made the playoffs in 8 consecutive seasons. 8. That is not a rough patch. That is a structural problem that has been compounding for the better part of a decade. And the new regime of Matt Ryan, new general manager Ian Cunningham, and Stefanski set out this offseason to stabilize things, to, in their own words, raise the floor of the roster rather than swing for the ceiling. That phrasing became significant because when anonymous NFL executives got wind of Atlanta's overall approach to the offseason and the draft, they were not exactly sending congratulatory messages. According to reporting from The Athletic, one anonymous NFL executive who spoke about the Falcons' offseason approach said flatly, "I don't know what Atlanta is doing yet. They have talked about raising the floor, but wouldn't you rather bottom out or raise the ceiling?" That is a league executive. Someone who watches tape for a living, who builds rosters for a living, looking at what the Falcons put together and openly questioning the direction. And that executive was not alone. The overall sentiment from around the league, per multiple reports, is that this new regime in Atlanta is not being extended much wait-and-see grace from anybody. When you have 8 straight losing seasons and your new leadership group comes in talking about raising the floor, the rest of the league is not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. They want to see results, and they want to see a coherent plan, and right now, from the outside looking in, that plan is not entirely clear. The quarterback situation in Atlanta is where things get truly interesting, and it connects directly to what Stefanski just left behind in Cleveland. The Falcons have Michael Penix Jr., the second-year quarterback, who was drafted 8th overall in 2024, who immediately became controversial because Atlanta made that pick just 1 week after signing Kirk Cousins to a fully guaranteed contract. Penix tore his ankle last season and is still working his way back. His timetable for returning to practice and training camp remains uncertain. So in the meantime, Matt Ryan and Stefanski made the decision to bring in Tua Tagovailoa, the former Miami Dolphins quarterback who spent the last couple of years battling through a brutal concussion history, to compete with Penix for the starting job once Penix is healthy. And that quarterback move got absolutely torched by executives around the league. Per reporting from Sports Boom's Jason La Canfora, the Tua signing produced what was described as a universal pan around the league. One executive looking for a quarterback this offseason told La Canfora that the move does not add up, specifically taking aim at the decision to move on from Kirk Cousins in favor of Tagovailoa. The sentiment in those executive circles was clear. Most people around the league believe Cousins is a better option than Tua right now, regardless of the contract numbers. And when you're a first-year head coach who spent 6 seasons in Cleveland and never solved the quarterback situation there, who watched Baker, Jacoby Brissett, Deshaun Watson, Dylan Gabriel, and Shedeur Sanders all cycle through that building, the last thing you want is for your first major personnel decision in a new city to get described as a universal pan by your peers. That is not a good start. But here is where Dre's personal opinion comes in, because I need to be fair here. Tua Tagovailoa in a dome, in warm weather, in the NFC South, that is a different conversation than Tua in Miami trying to survive outdoor games in Buffalo and New England in November and December. Atlanta's Mercedes-Benz Stadium is a dome. New Orleans is a dome. Tampa is a dome. Carolina plays outdoor, but that's the coldest road game in the entire division for most of the year. If Tua is healthy, and that is always the biggest if in any sentence about Tua Tagovailoa, he is at minimum an interesting fit for this offensive environment. Stefanski is known as a quarterback developer, and if he can get Tua to operate efficiently in a system designed to protect him and get the ball out quickly, there is an argument to be made. It's not a popular argument. NFL executives are not making that argument right now, but it exists, and Dre Fiver gives you both sides even when one side is a harder sell. Now let's get to the piece of this Atlanta situation that is genuinely the most damaging thing that has happened to this new regime before they even played a single game under Stefanski, and that is the James Pierce Jr. situation, because this is where the ghosts of the previous front office's decision-making are following Kevin Stefanski directly into his new building, and there is nothing he can do about it except manage the fallout. Here is the backstory for anyone who needs it. The previous Atlanta regime, Terry Fontenot and Raheem Morris, made the decision in the 2025 draft to trade their 2026 first-round pick to the Los Angeles Rams in order to move up and select edge rusher James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee at pick number 26. Pierce was a highly touted prospect, a guy with double-digit sack production in college, elite burst off the edge, the kind of profile that gets defensive coordinators excited. On the field in his rookie year, he actually delivered. Pierce recorded 10.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and 16 quarterback hits while earning Defensive Rookie of the Year consideration. The trade looked like it was going to work. And then, February 2026 happened. Pierce was arrested in Miami-Dade County, Florida, on 2 charges of aggravated battery with a deadly weapon and 1 count of aggravated stalking stemming from an alleged incident involving his former girlfriend. That is an extremely serious situation on every level. Legally, personally, and from a franchise perspective. He has not been with the team during their offseason program. A plea deal has reportedly been reached involving a diversion program, but a suspension from the NFL remains almost certain. The league's mandatory minimum for violence against women is 6 games. Pierce may or may not be available at the start of the 2026 season, and the Atlanta Falcons, who gave up their entire 2026 first-round pick to get him, are now in the position of not knowing whether their highest-profile defensive player from that trade will suit up in September. That pick, by the way, turned into the 13th overall selection, which the Rams used on Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson, who gets to sit behind Matthew Stafford and learn from Sean McVay. So the Falcons traded away what became a top 15 pick, got a player who cannot practice with the team right now, and the man they hired to fix everything, Kevin Stefanski, did not make that decision and cannot undo it. Now let's talk about what the Falcons actually did in the 2026 draft, because operating without a first-round pick creates a very specific kind of pressure on a front office. And how you respond to that pressure tells you a lot about where your priorities are. Atlanta's first selection in this draft came at pick number 48 in the second round, where they selected Avion Terrell, younger brother of current Falcons cornerback A.J. Terrell, out of Clemson. Terrell was projected by some analysts as a potential first-round talent who slid on draft day, and getting him at 48 was considered genuine value by most draft observers. The nepotism jokes came immediately on social media. The idea that Atlanta picked a player partly because his brother is already on the roster, but the film speaks for itself. And Terrell has the athleticism and technique to contribute at the NFL level. With their next selection, the Falcons grabbed wide receiver Zachariah Branch out of Georgia, adding another skill player to an offense that is going to need every weapon it can find while the quarterback situation gets sorted out. But here is where an anonymous executive speaking to The Athletic drew blood. That pick felt even more nostalgic than the Georgia rusher in the first round last year. It's cool that he's playing with his brother, but this isn't the NBA with Giannis Antetokounmpo. You have to make sure guys come in and contribute. That is a cutting comment, and it reflects the broader skepticism around the league about whether Atlanta's new regime has a clear identity and a clear plan, or whether they are making decisions that look reasonable on the surface but lack the connective tissue of a coherent vision. To be fair to Cunningham and Stefanski, they were working with limited draft capital, limited salary cap space, and a roster that was already in a difficult position before they walked through the door. You cannot fully rebuild what the previous regime built or failed to build in one offseason. That is not how this works. Let's zoom way out now and look at the full picture of Kevin Stefanski's situation, because understanding what he's dealing with in Atlanta requires understanding the full arc of what happened in Cleveland and how that history is following him south. In 6 seasons with the Browns, Stefanski was the starting quarterback merry-go-round coach of the modern NFL era. He oversaw 13 different starting quarterbacks in 6 years. 13. Only one of those seasons, 2020, the Baker Mayfield breakout year, had the opening day starter finish as the starter at the end of the year. He managed the Deshaun Watson trade fallout. He managed the Carson Wentz experiment. He managed the Jacoby Brissett bridge season. He managed Dylan Gabriel getting a concussion and handing the keys to Shedeur Sanders. And through all of it, the one thing every single former player and observer agrees on is that quarterback development was Stefanski's most significant blind spot as a head coach. Not scheme, not game planning, not culture, quarterback development. Jarvis Landry questioned it publicly. Baker Mayfield expressed his frustration publicly and loudly. Multiple evaluators around the league pointed to the 13 quarterback carousel as evidence of systemic dysfunction at the most important position in football. And now Kevin Stefanski walks into Atlanta, where Michael Penix Jr. is rehabbing from his second ankle tear. Tua Tagovailoa is competing for a starting job with a concussion history that the entire league monitors nervously, and the expectation is That Stefanski, the quarterback development question mark, is going to be the man who finally unlocks this offense. That is a significant ask. That is a lot of faith being placed in a track record that does not clearly support that faith. And anonymous executives around the league are saying exactly that out loud right now before the 2026 season has even started. Here's Dre's honest take on all of this, and I want to be real with you because that's what this channel is built on. Kevin Stefanski is not a bad football coach. He is a genuinely smart offensive mind who won Coach of the Year twice for real reasons. The 2020 Cleveland Browns season was not an accident. He built a functional offense around Baker Mayfield, he ran a creative ground game, he put players in positions to succeed, and he won 11 games with a franchise that had been a punchline for years. The problem is that the 6 years after 2020 exposed real limitations, a reactive decision-making style when things go wrong, an inability to cut bait quickly enough on failing situations, and yes, the quarterback development issue that kept compounding season after season. Those limitations do not disappear just because the city changes from Cleveland to Atlanta. They travel with the coach. They are the coach's job to fix. And until Kevin Stefanski demonstrates that he has actually grown in those areas, with Tua, with Penix, with whoever ends up taking that first snap in September, the skepticism from around the league is not unfair. It's earned. The NFC South is a division that is sneakier than people give it credit for. Tampa Bay has Baker Mayfield, who is going to be motivated out of his mind every single time he lines up against Kevin Stefanski's defense. Baker does not forget. Baker does not forgive. He is going to play every game against the Falcons like it is a personal audition for a revenge tour, and Buccaneers head coach Todd Bowles has already said publicly that he is going to back his quarterback in that rivalry. New Orleans has Alvin Kamara and a receiving core with real weapons if they can figure out their quarterback situation. Carolina is quietly building, with Monroe Freeling providing genuine protection on the offensive line and Bryce Young still developing. This is not a division where Stefanski gets to ease in gently. He is going to be tested from week 1, and the margin for error with a messy quarterback situation and a first-round defensive pick sitting in legal limbo is extremely thin. The bottom line on Kevin Stefanski and the Atlanta Falcons is this: the man inherited a situation that was already complicated before he walked in the door, and then the front office made decisions around him that have made it more complicated. He did not make the James Pierce trade. He did not create the Michael Penix-Ackle situation. He did not build the cap structure that forced Atlanta to focus on second-tier free agents while other teams in the division were upgrading at premium positions. Those are the cards he was dealt, and in fairness to Stefanski, you cannot hold him entirely responsible for what the previous regime constructed. But here is the thing: he chose to walk through that door. He looked at everything Atlanta was dealing with and said, yes, I want this job, which means he owns the results, regardless of the circumstances. That is what being a head coach means. You own it all. The wins, the losses, the quarterback competition, the draft picks that can't practice because of legal situations, the anonymous executives questioning your direction before. You've coached a single regular season game. You own all of it. And Dre Fiver is going to be watching every single move this man makes in Atlanta with the same critical eye that we turned on everything he did in Cleveland. Not because we have a problem with Kevin Stefanski the person, but because this is the NFL, accountability is the currency, and the city of Atlanta deserves a real answer at quarterback, a real direction, and a real plan, not another round of raising the floor language while the ceiling stays exactly where it's been for the past 8 seasons. Show us the plan, coach. Not in press conferences. On the field. If this video hit different, smash that like button right now and let the algorithm know this is the content people actually want to see. Drop your take in the comments below. I want to know, do you think Kevin Stefanski is going to succeed in Atlanta? Or is the baggage from Cleveland going to follow him all the way down I-85? Be honest. And if you are not subscribed to Dre Reports yet, fix that immediately. Hit subscribe. Tap that bell notification, because when the Falcons kick off week 1 of 2026 and Baker Mayfield is across that field from his old coach, Dre Fiver is going to be breaking down every snap in real time. No filter, no narrative, just facts. See you on the next one.